Hi, it's Lady Ilaria and I'm here to tell you a story. This one is called the J-Cloth Incident. We were in Flamingo Land, our favourite place in the whole world. Flamingo Land is kind of like Disneyland, but for poor people. There was a circus, a fun fair and a zoo. The zoo was where Albert the monkey lived with his wife Victoria. We would spend hours on end watching Albert the monkey sniff all of his mates' arses. My poor mum must have been bored stiff. Everywhere you looked there were ice cream vans, parents arguing and children screaming as they were flung about on the rides. Now, the one thing that we didn't experience were queues. That was because my mum did the very smart but illegal thing of taking us off school for a whole week. Now, it was in the past and things like that were fine back then. Plus, you know, we turned out all right. Not streetwise, but all right. Flamingo Land is in North Yorkshire and most people would only go for a day or a weekend at most. Not us. We'd go for the whole week and love it. It was very, very cheap. And you know what? It always lived up to our expectations. Or mine anyway. Though it did become harder and harder to ignore the rumours that Albert was a different monkey every year. I loved Flamingo Land so much that I made a 9-year-old family friend cry. Now, I was also 9 at the time. I mean, I'm not a monster. He just got back from the Canary Islands with stories of his travels. Now, he was a bit of a show-off, so I just stared him out, crossed my arms and said, "Yeah, but did you make friends with a monkey?" He had not. He went home and he begged his parents to take him to Flamingo Land. But they're a posh family. They wouldn't take him. Don't feel too sorry for him though, because he's grown up to be a massive racist. Now, the day was going great until me and my little sister had a near-death experience. We both ran over to the helicopter ride. It was our favourite one. Now, I wanted to go on and be the pilot, but my little sister, she's kind of scary, so she won. I mean, she's a kid that is so assertive that despite being much too short for the rides, still managed to get on. She came up with this really good idea of putting her hair in a high ponytail and then putting the hood up over the top. And when the staff would say, "Can we measure you?" she'd just look at them and say, "Are we really going to do this?" And then just walk straight on. She's a vet nurse now and is very good at it, but I'm convinced that the animals just get better purely out of fear. So there was no point in arguing. She was going to be the pilot. We excitedly jumped onto the ride and the staff came round to check all the children were in the ride safely before pressing the start button. Now, when they got round to our carriage, they realised that our safety door was broken. But instead of telling us to go into another carriage, they just decided to tie us in using a J-cloth. A J-cloth. Even as a kid, I remember thinking, well, this seems fucking stupid. Surely it's a joke. But oh no, it was happening. The ride started up. I turned to my sister to exchange a glance of pure terror. She looked back at me with a face full of excitement. She's gone mad, I thought. The ride went higher and higher. The ride tilted one side with the metal door. That's okay. And then the other side, the J-cloth side. Shit. Shit indeed. J-cloths should not be used to stop children from dying. I screamed for help really, really loudly as I felt the J-cloth begin to rip. I looked down at my mum screaming, "Mummy! Mummy, help us!" She couldn't hear me and just smiled and waved. I turned to my sister again for a bit of support, but she just threw her head back and laughed manically in glee. It was terrifying. After what felt like an eternity, the ride slowly lowered and stopped. My short life had flashed before my eyes. I had to seize the day. I just didn't know how. Me and my sister ran over to my mum and she was a bit confused as to why we were acting so differently to one another. I told my mum what had happened. My voice was all shaky. She gave me a hug and said, "Right, that is it. Where is that wee bugger who works this late? I will kick the living crap out of him." My little sister pulled down her hood and became 5 inches shorter. She looked at my mum and said, "No, mummy, don't tell them off. Ilaria is being a wimp. We found it thrilling. I felt alive." Her eyes were wild and she looked drunk. My mum marched us over to the photo kiosk and demanded to speak to someone in charge. A bloke with a pointy face and massive ears was the manager, and he spoke in a way that made everything sound like a question. After a very heated discussion and many unanswered questions, he finally gave in and handed my mum some coupons for the restaurant and a stuffed monkey toy each. Our very own Albert the monkey to take home. I remember thinking it had all been worth it. I mean, look at him. It had all been worth it. Now, fairly recently, I went to a school to deliver some drama workshops. Now, in the morning, I got to be Ilaria the detective, but in the afternoon, I got to be Mandy the monkey. Now, I was an expert due to watching Albert for all those years at Flamingo Land, but I remember thinking, my monkey skills are going to be wasted on these kids. But at the end of the school day, a little girl bounced up to me and said in her Mancunian accent, "Mandy the monkey, it's such a shame that you couldn't meet Ilaria the detective. You'd got on so well." So, thank you, Albert the monkey. Now, the little girl was in year 6, so I feel like someone should tell her. Now, I recently went back to Flamingo Land just for the day. Good news, Albert is still there. But for some weird reason, everybody kept calling him Tony. I don't know why. You all right, Albert?